What would you do if someone dared you to spend the night alone in the most haunted room in the world? One man said yes, and he never came out the same. This isn't a ghost story. It's a true account of one of London's oldest urban legends that left a nobleman paralyzed with fear forever. London, 1840. The night air is crisp, and the gas lamps glow dimly through a thin mist creeping through the wealthy streets of Berkeley Square. On the doorstep of number 50, a tall, proud man stands confidently, surrounded by 5 companions who seem far less certain. His name is Sir Robert Warboy, a man of noble blood and reckless heart. Known among his peers for embracing danger like an old friend, Robert is the type who leaps before he looks, and tonight he plans to leap into legend. He is here not for a social call, but to prove himself in the face of something even the boldest Londoners fear, the second-floor room of 50 Berkeley Square. Whispers about the room have haunted elite circles for decades. Strange noises, shadowy figures, men who enter and don't emerge sane. To Robert, it sounds like nonsense, or at worst, an exaggerated tale. A wager has been made. He's to spend the entire night locked inside. No tricks, no company, just him and whatever lies behind that ancient wooden door. The prize, bragging rights, and a substantial sum of money. But for Robert, it's never about the reward. It's a thrill, the story, the glory. As he turns to knock, his friends exchange looks. Some laugh nervously, others avoid eye contact. Robert grins, confident and unshaken. He believes he'll wake with a good tale for tomorrow's breakfast conversation at the Gentlemen's Club. Moments after Robert knocked, the door creaked open, revealing a middle-aged man with tired eyes and a stern expression. This was Charles Benson, the owner of the house, a man of reputation and mystery. Though he and Robert were not friends, they shared membership in an exclusive gentlemen's club, a place where rumors swirled like smoke and secrets passed through whispered conversations. Charles looked genuinely surprised to see Robert standing there, despite knowing he was coming. His face showed concern, not annoyance. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked gravely, his voice barely above a whisper. He wasn't questioning Robert's courage, he was warning him. There was something about that room, something unspoken, that Charles believed should never be disturbed. Robert, ever the thrill-seeker, simply tapped the pistol on his hip and gave a confident nod. His bravado didn't waver. Inside the house, the dim light of chandeliers cast long shadows over the antique furniture. The walls were lined with portraits of solemn-faced ancestors, their painted eyes seeming to follow Robert and his friends as they stepped in. Charles led them into the dining room, then excused himself to fetch something. The friends, now seated around a heavy oak table, grew visibly tense. Nervous glances, awkward chuckles. Robert tried to break the tension with jokes, but the air was thick with apprehension. Then, from the staircase, the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps echoed. Charles returned, holding an object tightly in his hand. He approached the table and placed an old iron key at its center. The room fell silent. "In 10 years," he began, his voice steady, "I've only used this key a few times. When not in use, I keep it hidden, for good reason." He looked at Robert with somber eyes. "If you're still certain, it's yours." Without hesitation, Robert reached out and took the key, and the night truly began. With the iron key now in his possession, Robert clutched it tightly as if it were a medal of honor. He and his companions followed Charles through the dimly lit corridor, the flickering wall sconces casting unsettling shadows along the way. The group ascended the creaky wooden staircase, every step groaning beneath their weight, echoing through the hollow silence of the mansion. They reached the second floor, where time itself seemed to slow down. The hallway stretched ahead, narrow and lined with faded wallpaper. At the end of it stood a single door, tall, dark, and strangely cold to the touch. No other door in the house exuded such an ominous presence. The group huddled, their nervous energy palpable. Even Charles, who lived in the house for over a decade, kept a noticeable distance from the door. Without waiting for further hesitation, Robert stepped forward. He removed the key from his coat pocket, inserted it into the lock, and turned. The sound was sharp, metallic, and final. The door creaked open slowly, revealing not a portal to horror, but what appeared to be a beautifully furnished bedroom. The tension broke for a moment. Inside, antique furniture filled the room, a tall, carved wardrobe, a rich red rug, velvet drapes drawn tight over the windows. But what caught Robert's attention most was the four-poster bed beneath an ornate canopy, and dangling from the ceiling directly above it, a crimson ribbon tied to a servant's bell pull. It was the only thing in the room that hinted at something odd. Robert stepped fully into the room, looking around with curiosity rather than fear. Behind him, Charles placed a hand on his shoulder one last time. "This is your last chance," Charles whispered. "Leave now, and nothing will change." Robert glanced back at his friends. He smiled. "I'll see you in the morning." He closed the door, then locked it from the inside. Downstairs in the dim servants' quarters, the air hung heavy with anticipation. Robert's 5 companions sat silently, cross-legged on the old wooden floor. The flickering light from a single oil lamp danced across their anxious faces. No one was joking anymore. Gone were the smirks and casual bravado that had filled the dining room just an hour earlier. Now, only tension remained. The bell, mounted above the kitchen entry, was the center of everyone's attention. It was connected directly to the crimson ribbon in Robert's room. If it rang, it meant trouble. If it rang, it could mean something unnatural. Charles had shown them how it worked. He'd pointed solemnly at the little brass bell, explaining that in all his years in the house it had rarely ever moved, and when it did, something horrible always followed. Tonight, he warned, it wasn't just a precaution, it was a lifeline. To calm their nerves, the group decided to pass the time by playing blackjack on the floor. No money was wagered. The stakes were already too high. Each man held his cards with a twitchy grip, eyes darting constantly between the bell and the game. But there was no real focus, no immersion. They were just waiting, listening, dreading. Hours passed slowly. The clock ticked with maddening indifference. Midnight came and went, and then it happened. A scream, sharp, unmistakable. It sliced through the house like a blade. Every man shot to his feet. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then chaos exploded. Chairs flew back, cards scattered. And just as they started racing for the stairs, the bell began to ring. Not just a gentle jingle, it clanged violently, like an alarm from hell. They collided with Charles in the hallway. He looked pale but composed, as if he'd prepared for this moment for years. Without a word, the group bolted up the stairs, hearts pounding, feet thunderous on the creaking steps. The screaming stopped. The bell fell silent. And suddenly, the mansion was still again. They stood on the second floor, in front of that same door Robert had locked behind him. Not a sound came from within. The silence was far more terrifying than any noise. Then, a loud gunshot. It jolted them to action. They banged on the door, shouting Robert's name. Nothing. No answer. Panic gripped them. They began kicking the door, again and again. The century-old wood groaned under pressure. And finally, with a splintering crack, it gave way. What they saw inside would haunt them forever. The heavy door burst inward, slamming against the wall with a thunderous crack. The 7 men stumbled inside, breathless and pale. Their eyes adjusted quickly to the dim lamplight spilling from the hallway behind them, and what they saw made their blood run cold. The room looked undisturbed at first glance. The same velvet drapes hung tightly shut. The same antique wardrobe and rug remained in place. But there was an eerie stillness, as if the air itself had frozen in fear. Then they saw it. The crimson ribbon from the bell pulled above the bed had been torn violently from the ceiling. It lay limp in Robert's hand, clutched so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. His pistol lay on the floor beside the bed, one round clearly fired. A smoking bullet hole marred the far wall, an aimless, desperate shot. And Robert was still. He lay flat on the bed, arms stiff by his sides, back arched slightly as if frozen in mid-convulsion. His mouth hung open in a grotesque grimace, teeth bared, lips pulled back unnaturally. His eyes were wide, so wide they barely looked human, bloodshot and frozen in a lifeless stare. One friend stepped forward, calling his name, shaking him. No response. Another touched his wrist. Cold, stone cold. That's when the truth sank in. Robert Warboy was dead. But it wasn't just death that haunted the room. It was the way he had died, locked in a moment of sheer, paralyzing terror. No wounds, no injuries, just fear. Charles, who had hung back at the doorway, finally stepped inside, his face ashen. He said nothing. There was nothing to say. It wasn't the first time this had happened. The previous owner, Charles had once learned, had confined his violent and mentally unstable brother in this very room. After that man died here, alone and raving, strange things began to occur. Cries at night, furniture moved, and sometimes a figure, gray, formless, slinking along the walls. They had called it the Nameless Thing, and now Robert had met it. The following morning, long after the sun had risen over the fog-laced rooftops of London, an official coroner arrived at 50 Berkeley Square. His boots echoed against the cobbled stones as he stepped into a house now hushed with dread. The once boisterous group of friends was now silent, seated in the parlor like mourners in a wake. Robert's lifeless body had not been moved from the bed. The coroner examined him thoroughly, his posture, his muscles, his eyes frozen wide with terror. There were no physical injuries, no signs of poisoning, nothing to explain how a healthy, strong young man had died so suddenly. The final cause of death? Massive heart failure, triggered by unknown circumstances. But those who had been there the night before knew the truth. Charles gave his testimony quietly, recounting the legends he had long tried to ignore. Stories of the room on the second floor, the strange noises, the movements in the shadows, the thing without a name. And now, a man lay dead in that room, his face forever etched with the terror of what he saw. The friends, still shaken, confirmed everything. The screams, the bell, the shot, the silence. The tragedy made headlines in certain circles, especially among London's elite. But what really spread, whispered in gentlemen's clubs, discussed in hushed tones at high society dinners, was the legend. The room, the death, and the thing inside it. Over the decades, 50 Berkeley Square would change hands many times. Some owners stayed only for months before fleeing. Others never set foot in that second-floor bedroom. Paranormal investigators, thrill-seekers, and skeptics all came to test the story, and many left changed. Some claimed they saw it. Others swore they heard it breathing. Some refused to even describe what they experienced. To this day, the room remains closed. Its windows stay shut. Its key was kept hidden. And locals still warn, never spend a night at 50 Berkeley Square, because whatever lives in that room is still waiting. Nearly 2 centuries have passed since the night Sir Robert Warboy entered that room. Today, 50 Berkeley Square still stands, a stately Georgian townhouse with ivy-clad brick and black iron gates. To a passerby, it may seem like just another relic of old London, nestled among antique bookshops and quiet cafes. But to those who know the story, it is a place of legend, of fear, of unanswered questions. The room itself remains locked. Most current occupants refuse to even discuss it. Tour guides speak of it in whispers. Paranormal investigators have petitioned to study it. Many denied. A few who entered report strange symptoms, nausea, hallucinations, sudden drops in temperature. One visitor swore he felt watched the entire time, and when he turned, the mirror was fogged with the imprint of a hand. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the room isn't what has been seen, but what is felt. That heavy, invisible weight pressing on the chest. The primal instinct to run. The unshakable sense that something ancient and angry is there. Some say it's just a story. Others say it's the most haunted room in England. But if you're brave enough, or foolish enough, you can still find it. Just don't expect to leave the same. So, the next time you hear a tale about a haunted house or a cursed room, remember Robert Warboy. He didn't believe either, and it cost him everything.